previous session, we talked about what are the different life processes we come across, and what is the mode of nutrition in plants, and how do they synthesize their own food. So that was the topic we touched in the previous session. Now this session, we will be talking about organisms which cannot prepare their own food, that is the heterotrophic mode of nutrition. To give as an example, we are going to look at the nutrition in amoeba, a unicellular organism. So let's look at the subtopics we are going to touch today. The first one will be, what are heterotrophic organisms and how do they obtain their food? The second subtopic will be, how does amoeba get its nutrition? What is the kind of nutrition amoeba does? And the third one will be, what are the different steps followed when it comes to amoeba as it takes this nutrition? Now going forward to the next one. So we will start with nutrition in amoeba. Before we get into understanding what happens in amoeba, let's look at what we have learned about heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So since organisms cannot make their own food, they directly or indirectly, they are dependent on other organisms. Now this method, we call it as heterotrophic mode of nutrition. And under heterotrophic, we saw three subcategories in the previous session. That is the parasitic, then we saw holozoic, and we also saw saprophytic. Parasitic nutrition, as the term says, is directly dependent on the host, whereas the saprophytic organisms, they take nutrition from the substratum they live on. To give an example, we can give the example for parasitic nutrition, the Cuscuta plant or the Dodder plant, which is a complete parasite on its host. The next one will be a saprophytic mode of nutrition, where you can give the example of fungi under this category. Now, this particular holozoic also comes under the same category of heterotrophic nutrition, but here the food is taken or swallowed inside as a whole, and then the process of digestion starts inside the body of an organism. So for this to look at, we gave here the example of amoeba. Now, amoeba, what are the different steps followed in amoeba? Considering amoeba to be a unicellular organism, the single cell performs all its activities. So it will be in direct contact with the environment, and the process is very simple as compared to that of the complex organisms. So they are in direct contact with the environment, so it is simple diffusion what we look at. So based on the simple diffusion and simple contact with that particular outside world, we look at the different steps of this particular kind of nutrition. So the first step will be ingestion. Ingestion will be the taking of food. The second one will be the digestion. That is, after taking the food, with the help of enzymes, the food will be digested. The third will be the absorption. So once the food is digested, it has to be absorbed by the body. Fourth one is assimilation. How the absorbed food is converted to energy is assimilation. And the last step will be egestion. That is to remove the unwanted substances from the body which are not required to the body. In amoeba, it is very simple mechanism. It follows all the steps. Amoeba being an unicellular organisms, we'll be looking at only two different methods for either taking the food or giving out the unwanted excretory material. The first one will be a food vacuole, and the second one we will be looking at is a contractile vacuole. So now, what is this food vacuole and what is this contractile vacuole? So whenever an amoeba sees a particular food, it's supposed to be taken inside, it develops, looking at the food particle, it develops artificial feet, which we call it as pseudopodia. Now these pseudopodia, being the false feet, they are only temporary in nature. So whenever the animal wants to take food, it temporarily produces out this kind of feet-like processes. So now these are called as pseudopodia. Now what does the pseudopodia do? It will take that food particle and it will close it down around that particular pseudopodia. Now this becomes the first one, which is called as the food vacuole. Now you can see a food vacuole which has been developed here. This food vacuole, with the help of certain kinds of enzymes which are present in the body of that amoeba, it is absorbed and digested. So once it is absorbed, it has to be processed in the form of energy. Now that we call it as assimilation. And once the assimilation is done, the unwanted food which is not required by the organism will be taken out with the help of a contractile vacuole. So the entire process, what we are looking at, that is this holozoic mode of nutrition, is done in 5 steps, and in amoeba it is based on only 2 vacuoles, that is the food vacuole and the contractile vacuole. And for this, the pseudopodia will be a mechanism. So once the contractile vacuole is pushed to the outside, the pseudopodia are withdrawn and then it goes back to its normal shape. So to understand, we all know that amoeba doesn't have any particular shape. So this is all about the nutrition in amoeba, which is a holozoic mode of nutrition, followed in 5 different steps: ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and egestion. Now the similar way, we will be looking at one more unicellular organism in the same category, having the holozoic type of nutrition, which is Paramecium. Onto the screens you have Paramecium. Now this is commonly called as a slipper animalcule. Now this is also a protozoan, being a single-celled organism. But what is the major difference in the holozoic mode of nutrition between amoeba as well as Paramecium? Paramecium has a specific way of taking that food inside the body. Amoeba just develops the pseudopodia, it engulfs the food and then makes a food vacuole out of it. But in the case of Paramecium, as you can see, you have a special way of picking up the food particles during a particular place. So the food enters inside the Paramecium at a specific point and the food will be circulated across the entire body. You can see the food is being circulated to the entire body. Now this process, we call it as cyclosis. The major difference with the mode of nutrition will be, they also have the food vacuoles, the contractile vacuoles. They also have the entrance where the oral groove is present. So food enters through the oral groove. You don't have a pseudopodia here. You have cilia as the locomotory organs, and cilia will guide the food particles inside this particular place, which is the vestibulum or the oral groove. Now food will be circulated inside the body and slowly it will be following the 5 steps which goes on in this nutrition. Finally, the food is ejected out by means of a contractile vacuole. But the streaming movement of the food vacuoles, we call it as cyclosis when it comes to Paramecium. So major difference between amoeba and Paramecium is, amoeba, the food procurement is not specific in its nature, whereas in Paramecium it is very specific, and the point also how it takes the food is very specific. Now that's the major difference between these two. Now, understanding these two, let's look at 2 questions here which are given on the board. Now, what is the mode of nutrition in amoeba? You should be talking about that it is a heterotrophic mode of nutrition. And you also write, in heterotrophic you have the holozoic mode, so where the food is taken inside as a whole and then digested with the help of a digestive enzymes. So you can give the mode of nutrition to be heterotrophic, and in that sub category you can give holozoic type of nutrition. You can explain, you can draw the diagram, depending the number of marks you have it as a question. Now what are the structures which help in procuring of food in amoeba and Paramecium? We understood that it is amoeba, you have the pseudopodia or the false feet, and in Paramecium it is just the cilia which helps in pushing the food towards the oral groove or the mouth region. That's the difference between these two. Now coming to the other questions, what are the steps followed in heterotrophic type of nutrition? Taking amoeba as an example, you will have to draw a diagram of amoeba showing the following steps. What we saw, the 5 steps of digestion, that is That is the ingestion, all the 5 steps. That is ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and digestion. You will be drawing the diagrams and you will be explaining how actually it happens with the help of pseudopodia and as well as the contractile and the food vacuole. Now that will be the answer for that. Now coming to the next question, what are the cyclic movement of the food particles in paramecium called as? So we said it is called as a cyclosis, and it happens in a very specific way. It moves and across the entire body before it starts digesting its food material. For today, this will be the conclusion for us. To conclude, we have learned about what is meant by heterotrophic nutrition and what is the subcategory, that is holozoic type of nutrition, and how it happens in paramecium and amoeba. And then we have looked at few questions. In the coming session, we will be looking at the other part of it, that is human digestive system and its parts. We will try to understand how digestion happens in humans.